Thank you for tuning in to ICT on PNC, a podcast covering issues that impact the Texas insurance industry. The Insurance Council of Texas is a nonprofit trade association serving the property and casualty insurance industry. We're proud to be the largest state-based insurance trade association in North America. Welcome to ICT on PNC.
I'm Albert Beth, Executive Director of the Insurance Council of Texas, and joining me today is Angie Cervantes, Manager of Government and Legislative Affairs. Angie,
Hi, good to be here.
good to be here. We're gonna sitting here almost a little over a year after Winter Storm Uri. We want to talk a little bit about the latest results on insurance claims and payments and losses, and some of the discussion on the anniversary of a very cold and very terrible week for Texans. Angie, I can recall we were just talking about here in my house, Valentine's Day last year. I literally had to cook the steaks in the cast iron pan and then in the oven. That came out good. So it was a little colder last Valentine's Day.
I can't say that I am not that I am excited to not see snow today. So it was really cold. No water, no electricity for a week. It was a challenge.
It was a challenge for a lot of Texans, and as we all know, unfortunately, we had folks who lost their lives in the storm, and it's a tragic event. Thankfully, it looks like this year we're going to escape that. So let's talk a bit about the latest from the Department of Insurance. Last spring, they did a data call to insurers across the state who represented about 95% of the property and automobile market to ask the basic question: what happened with the storm? What happened in terms of losses and claims? And TDI has been updating that report periodically. I think the last report came out back on February 8th. So we're going to talk about the results of that data call. We would expect further updates as we move forward, but this really gives you a snapshot as of August 31st last year, which is about 100 plus days after the storm, to see where in terms of claims and in terms of losses, and a breakdown of where those claims happened, Angie. Well, I should say not surprisingly, given the scope of the storm or the severity of the storm, we have over 503,000 claims that were reported to Texas insurers. How does that compare to other big storms we've had in this state? Not ice storms, but large hurricanes and other events.
So as far as just magnitude, claim-wise, and then I think just touching upon the ultimate loss, $10.6 billion. We are looking at this being the third biggest storm in Texas. So behind the two hurricanes, Ike and Harvey. So Harvey was at 19 billion, and then Ike was at 13.2.
You're right. Those were two very large hurricanes in terms of dollar losses. And claims-wise, Harvey had over 700,000 claims reported. So this winter storm is approaching. I don't think it'll ultimately reach that number, but it's getting near the amount of claims filed under an event such as Harvey. So record-breaking in so many different ways, as you mentioned. Most of the claims from the data that TDI shared, about 85% are on residential property policies, about 428,000 or so, 10% on commercial property policies. And as I recall, Angie, if you look back through the updated report, that commercial property number has grown a little bit steadily over time. And then 3.7% being on personal auto, but only physical damage policies, which is what TDI was seeking data on. And you're right, 10.6 billion will ultimately be paid. That number's gone 1 or 2 percentage points in the last few updates, but definitely over 10 billion paid. And then most importantly, Angie, something that we've been talking about and we've heard mentioned in the reinsurance market, reinsurance is going to cover, expected cover about $3.2 billion in losses. So a big event on the reinsurance side, and obviously reinsurers never imagined uh, paying that much for a winter storm here in Texas. So historic in so many different ways.
Yes, it is definitely historic. And as you said, the bulk of it has been residential. I think TDI had the number that about 3.8 billion has been paid out to policyholders residential. And total, it was up 8% from just the last report, which was last month.
Yeah, it's big is the only way you can describe. It's just amazing, and you would expect most of the losses out of that storm to be residential, given the number of structures, insured structures in the state, and the damage that's done to houses across the state. Um, Obviously, given the scope of the storm, the type of storm, most of the claims were water damage claims. For the last year, and particularly back in last spring, we had a lot of questions from the media and other outlets asking about water damage claims in the state. Companies have never seen water damage claims at this level, and I'm talking from an annual basis. They have not seen them at the level you saw them from this storm. And one thing we've talked a lot about is just seeing how Texans have had to learn more about the coverages they have in their policies for burst water pipes or frozen water pipes. And it's a variety of coverages. Texas, there are no standard forms that everybody has to use, but as we've looked at those coverages and as homeowners have looked at their policy language, this has been a learning experience. The policies vary. There may be policy limits. $5,000 is the number that we typically use as an example if there is coverage for damage due to burst water pipes. And so it's just been a learning experience, I think, all the way around for policyholders to understand their coverages, understand their deductibles, and understand the insurance claims process. But overall, Angie, as you look at TDI's data, it seems that companies, for the most part, have done a very good job of responding to this record level winter event. We're talking, like you touched on earlier, over a million claims, but looking at the TDI data, it just seemed like it did not cause a problem in terms of having adjusters and claims staff available to handle this unprecedented event. I know we've used that word a lot.
There's really not another word for it.
There's no word for it. You're right. Every time I try to think of another way to describe it, I come back to unprecedented in terms of scope, in terms of something as simple as just getting a plumber out to make repairs or a roofer to make repairs. Those were challenges just because of the sheer number of pipes that need to be fixed, the number of roofs that had to be repaired. And so there's a variety of challenges outside of the actual claims process and insurers responding that popped up during this. And I know, occasionally we've heard about slow repairs, and maybe not due to the insurance process itself, but simply due to I've got to get a contractor out, and where can I find one to come do my work?
But I do think that it was pretty. I think it is pretty impressive, just their ability to be able to work through it, and like you said, get the people out there. I know that during the storm, I live in an apartment building, and it took a while for us to get back up and running when not being under construction because of the freezing pipes that burst, and then there was trouble finding the materials and the plumbers, and so it was a challenge. But ultimately, it looks like there's only 9% of claims open, and 54 of those were closed with a payment to the policyholder, which I think is good. 37% were closed without payment. Can you tell us a little bit about why some of this might might have happened. Those that are not closed, I think it's a relatively, small percentage, but for people that are curious.
Yeah, given the scope, obviously a very small percentage are still open, less than 10, as you mentioned. And that may be for a variety of reasons. There's still some claims adjusting occurring. There may be questions about the scope or amount of damages, uh, questions about the policy coverages, there's a dispute about the claim itself. So that's going to happen. There's processes in place to help resolve those. But when you think about 500,000 claims in the door, and that's not even counting other claims that happen throughout the year in terms of the hailstorms and tornadoes that we had throughout the state in the spring and the fall. I think the industry, these numbers show the industry's done a very good job of responding to an event that frankly you don't expect or anticipate in any year. So there are a few
Especially not in
stories out.
Texas.
Not in Texas. You might see
Yeah.
this. I think this week it's back up north, snowstorms and freezing weather up there, but you just don't see that here. So you're right. The 9% is I think, a very good representation of how well the industry's responded, and those claims will get resolved one way or another. But I think the industry has done the best it can and done a really exemplary job of being there and trying to respond to this weather disaster. There's questions that may come up, like I said, whether there's coverage or not. This is one of the lessons of, did my policy have, what did it have for water damages? You may have had some damages in instances that were lower than the deductible. So you may have some questions and disputes going on. I know we've seen some stories recently, and not a lot of them, but a couple of folks, homeowners in particular, complaining of their claim hadn't been paid, or whatever payment has been made, they don't believe it's enough to repair the damages that at least they've got cost estimates for. And I think one thing, Angie, keep in mind, unfortunately, over the last few months, we've had such an increase in cost in construction materials, which is actually, let me back up, was already rising last year for construction, but that's continued to happen. So you've got higher costs to just get material and get folks in to do the work. So I think those claims will get worked on and hopefully resolved satisfactorily.
Yeah, and then going along with that, I know that there's been some articles talking about a law that was passed back in 2019, and how that might be affecting any of these claims from either being paid or the speed of the claims. I think they're saying it's the blue tarp law, which is actually, it was actually House Bill 1774 from 2019. Do you have anything that we can just let people know about that particular bill and legislation and how it relates to the winter storm?
Yeah, House Bill 1774. It's I think the name you referenced is something some consumer groups, Texas in particular, have thrown out there. It's actually a property litigation reform bill. And I think, Angie, it was 2017, it was actually enacted around the time we had experienced a 1,400% growth in property damage litigation, particularly after hailstorms. Litigation had just gotten out of hand. It had, in effect, become a litigation lottery with mass lawsuits being filed and companies, in many instances, being put in a position where they were forced to settle at exaggerated amounts due to exaggerated demand. So, yeah, a lot of talk, some rhetoric coming out of his watch, alleging that claims aren't being paid out of the winter storm, or companies are purposely delaying payment because of House Bill 1774, supposedly giving some incentive to not pay a claim or to delay a claim. And nothing could be farther from the truth. In a nutshell, what 1774 did was fairly simple. Not that it was simple to get there as a result, but fairly simple in terms of changes. It still provides for consumers, if their company has violated the law, to be able to sue those companies. The big couple of the big differences is if a company or if a consumer believes the company's violated the law, they have to give notice, or they're turning notice to the insurance companies at least 60 days before filing a lawsuit. And that gives time for the company to respond, to try to resolve the dispute as possible. Because many times before 1774, you actually had instances where companies did not know that there was a dispute about a claim, but simply were served with a lawsuit. But 1774 does not in any way incentivize companies not to pay claims. I think part of that allegation, Angie, is that I've heard that 1774 took away penalty interest. Well, that's not true. 1774 actually provides for penalty interest that will range between 10 and 20%. Basically what the law says is it is 5% above the state Texas Finance Code, but state law on post-judgment interest, which ultimately means it could range from 10 to 20. So a company, they're not incentivized not to pay claims. There's still penalty interest there. There's still the possibility of damages. What the law did, though, was tighten up the litigation process and provide us some notice provisions. Also, real quick, just basically said if you're going to make an outrageous demand, if the ultimate result of the lawsuit is less than 80% of your original demand, your attorney's fees may be reduced. So the law is still there. The name Blue Tarp Law, I think, is just a catchy slogan that Texas Watch throws out every now and then to try to draw attention to an issue. But I think, the one thing I would urge out of this winter storm event, one thing we learned in talking to the media and press and public is that we need everyone, including Texas Watch, but everyone needs to do what they can to try to make sure consumers understand their policy coverage, their insurance choices, and so they can make the best choice about what they need to help cover their property and some of the most expensive possessions. So we'll see how this goes. I think companies have done a great job in responding. The misinformation about what's happened with the claims or how 1774 has influenced those claims is unfortunate. But I think in the end, when you look at the raw data and the numbers, companies are doing what they're supposed to do. So I'm sure TDI looks like this update, Angie, what is it, every month right now? It looks like it's coming out.
Seems to be every month. And so we should be expecting, I guess, another one in March. And I think that you're right. Just a year ago when we were talking about what can we imagine the scope being, I think I remember, a couple of billion being thrown around, but this is much bigger and being much bigger than we could have thought then.
Yeah, much bigger. I think, in fact, when we, and I remember the date for some reason, back on March 2nd last year at the legislature, when we testified, at that point, our best guesstimate on losses, I thought we said perhaps 5 to 8 billion at the time. And even then, we obviously didn't know the full extent of damages and claims. But to see, what's happened, and it looks like it's going to blow well past our top guesstimate at that time, gives you some sense of just how widespread it was and how damaging those storms were to homes and businesses across the state. So, knock on wood, hope we don't have another one anytime soon. But definitely a lesson learned. And as these data results come out from TDI, I know we do share them with our membership through our various publications and updates. But periodically, we may have a quick podcast like this one and just kind of go through what the numbers say, what they mean. I think I'll kind of wrap up by saying there's nothing in those numbers that when I look at them, and I'll ask you to chime in too, Andrew, there's nothing that's shocking other than the scope and size of it, but nothing that's really shocking in terms of what's happened with the claims, where they're distributed, because I know TDI broke it down by county so you can see where most of the claims have happened and amounts paid. But but we'll update, and I think it's just a good example of, again, the insurance industry being able to pivot and respond to really large, unexpected events like last year's ice storm.
Right. Everybody did a great job, and yeah, looking forward to getting the rest of the numbers and updating people accordingly.
All right. Well, thanks, Angie. We'll keep our members updated when the next report comes out. And thank you for joining us and catching up on a quick recap of 1 year later, where we are with the winter storm catastrophe. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you hopefully soon. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this edition of ICT on PNC. Find us online at insurancecouncil.org for more information about our organization or about the property and casualty insurance industry in Texas.